Hello everyone. Today we will discuss about Kamala Das. Kamala Das as a confessional poetess. Today we discuss how Kamala Das poetry is confessional. Kamala Das was born in 1934 and she wrote till 2009. She was a poet and author from Kerala, India, and she wrote mainly in English and Malayalam. And she was a pioneer of confessional poetry in India. She was the first poetess who tried confessional things in her poetry. She maintains a distinctly feminine tone in her works. She expresses her experience of love, focuses mainly on personal experience rather than colonial one. That's why we can say that Kamala Das is a confessional poetess. So we should know about what is confessional poetry, because we are discuss about Kamala Das as a confessional poetess. So we should know about what is a confessional poetry. In the next slide, we will discuss about the confessional poetry. Confessional poetry means when a people engaged in his or her personal experience, and the poet or poetess described about their personal experience or their personal relationships with other persons. That type of poetry is called confessional poetry. Many poets were concerned with confessional poetry in India, but we can say that Kamala Das was the pioneer in this field. Now in next slide we will discuss about the style of Kamala Das. She was open and honest about her personal relationship and about her personal experience in life, and she was also open and honest of the treatment of female sexuality. That was the main point of her poetry. She open about sexuality, and she always discussed female sexuality with the help of her poetry. Unflinchingly honest exploration of the self, free from any sense of guilt. She was truly honest about her experience in her life, and she was free from any kind of sense of guilt in her poetry. And she discussed urban life in her poetry, and she also tried to explain women's role in traditional Indian society. She discussed women's dilemmas, feminine sensibility, and rebellion. She was also one of a rebellion women of her time. That's why she discussed rebellion women of Indian society in her poetry. Let's discuss her style in next slides. First of all, we'll discuss about feminine sensibility. Kamala Das poetry is a frank and straightforward expression of feminine sensibility. She revolts against the exploitation of women. She expressed the anger against the male dominance in the society. She tried to impart an identity to Indian women. Thus, her poetry signals the advent of new phenomenon in Indo-Anglian society. Next, which she discusses in her poetry, is frustration in love. Kamala Das is a poet of love and sexual relationships. Love and sex from the main theme in her poetry. Her poetry is largely an expression of her frustration in love. She always speaks of her unfulfillment love and expresses her need for love. The frustration of love boils over in poem like The Invitation and The Looking Glass. When we discuss in detail the poetry Invitation and Looking Glass, we can easily find out the traces of physical love in those poetries. And the last but not the least, let's conclude the slides. Thus Kamala Das is a great poet, we can say that, because she is a pioneer in this field of confessional poetry, and she was a great poetess because she confessed with the help of her poetry her sins, her physical relationship with other man. She confessed many things in her poetry boldly without any guilt. She directed the paths of women poems in modern England poetry. She has certainly made a name of herself by virtue of craftsmanship. No doubt, her poetry is autobiographical and confessionals. She reminds us of Annie Sexton and Sylvia Plath. The charge of obscurity and obsession with sex is groundless, being a confessional poetry, express her own emotions. Many people called Kamala Das a vulgar poetess, but that is not true, because she was a confessional poetess. She confessed what she experienced in her life, and that's why we couldn't say that her poetry is vulgar or fulfilled with sexual images. That was her confession. She wanted to confess all these things in her poetry, and that's why we can say that she was a great poetess of her time. She was a truly confessional poetess because she didn't have any guilt to express her own personal experience, whether those experiences related with sexual intercourse or any other thing in his life. Thank you so much.